Welcome, this is A.J.B from A.J.B Counseling and Psychotherapy. I'm a therapist in the state of New York and New Jersey, and I specialize in the treatment of panic disorder and agoraphobia. And today I'm going to bring to you a study from the field of social psychology that supports my hypothesis that anger will help us in the treatment of anger will help you if you're trying to overcome agoraphobia or panic disorder. So the unifying factor between panic disorder and agoraphobia are panic attacks or fear of panic attacks. And anger, I found clinically, in my clinical experience, is helpful in overcoming it. Okay? So this study, while it's not from a clinical journal, I am 99% certain will translate to clinical psychology, to a clinical situation, again, because of what I've witnessed in my practice, and it also is theoretically sound. So let's quickly go over the theory as to why anger could be very helpful. And then later we'll go on how you can apply it, because it's not like you can just get angry and boom, you'll get rid of your panic, although it is possible. It's just probably unlikely. You probably have to combine it with an overall treatment plan. Now I'll get into that. So let's keep going. So I did a whole lot of marking up here, and I realized it's too much to cover, so I'm just going to focus on the most important thing. There is a theory called the appraisal theory right here, and it helps us understand how we react to different situations based on two things: our perceived sense of control over the situation, our perceived sense of certainty and control. Right? So certainty over a situation refers to how sure are we that we understand what's going on, and control refers to how much confidence do we have that we can have an impact on what's happening in this situation, right? Can we change the situation? So the appraisal theory says that you'll be anxious when you perceive low level of certainty and low level of control. The appraisal theory also says that you're more likely to experience anger if you perceive high level of certainty and a high level of control. Okay, so it's somewhere over here. It says that. But this might be a two-way street. Okay, so in other words, it may not be necessary for you to interpret the situation as high in certainty and high in control, but instead we might be able to make you experience high level of certainty and high level of control just by pissing you off, just by making you angry, right? This might be a two-way street, and that's sort of what these researchers are finding. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So let's quickly just cover the most important stuff. That's the stuff in, what is this color? Teal? Is that teal? So these researchers suspect exactly that one tactic to restore sense of control and certainty is by experiencing anger when given the opportunity. So my trick, my goal when I treat people for agoraphobia and panic is to help create what these researchers refer to as a foothold for the anger to unfold more naturally. So personification is one of those things. Identification of an enemy, of a target, personification, and then also induction of anger. And I'll cover more. I'll talk more about that a little later. Something else that these researchers happily, I say happily because this is like a perfect research for me when it comes to writing up this hypothesis, this research proposal, is that they pretty much mention everything I need to be mentioned. They say that the target of your anger can be a symbol. It doesn't have to be an individual, right? This is from social psychology, so they're mostly talking about people. But this can be a symbol, which is, in our case, panic attack is not a person, but we can represent it symbolically. So personification, turning your panic into a person, will make the expression of anger more natural. I don't remember if I mentioned it, but I haven't written up the research proposal for this yet, but I will do that. I started it and then I kind of just got sidelined. Anyways, let's keep going. So let me just quickly go over what these researchers what the basic setup of this study is. So the first thing they do, the theory that they have, the hypothesis they have, is that if we scare somebody first, we expect participants threatened by reminders of global uncontrollability to show, sorry, I'm covering everything as I'm doing that. Right here, this part right here, expect participants threatened by reminders of global uncertainty to show decreased levels of motivation. However, anger at an enemy may provide a foothold for general approach orientation, boosting motivation and actual performance of approach-oriented. I made a mess of this. You know what? Let me just explain it in plain words instead of playing around with the highlighter thing. I'm just having way too much fun using it. They're basically saying this, that in situations where there is first a threat identification, so I am identifying a problem that's endangering me, by framing things in a way that will hopefully induce anger and pointing to a clear enemy, that's going to, for some individuals, statistically, we're going to see this, that statistically, on average, people are going to A, experience more anger, and B, as a result, experience more motivation, and their actual performance, if we were to measure it with an actual, like, let's say you got to do some sort of a task, like sort cards or something, and somehow that task is, well, actually, I don't even think it has to be related. The task is just going to be a performance test. So you got to, let's just say, you got to hit this space bar every time a green light comes up. Your performance, motivation to do well will increase. This is their theory. And I'm going to spoil the ending. They pretty much find exactly that. Let's keep going. So they did 3 studies to test all of their hypotheses. And bam, let's go from the first one right here. We're not going to get into the details. Not that important. Participants experiencing threat-induced anxiety, right? So first we showed them something scary, who are presented with an opportunity for anger at an enemy showed higher perceptions of control and certainty as well as higher motivation. Wow, cool, right? But this was, I believe it was just self-reported. So now they gotta check, one of the things they're gonna do is they're gonna check, does this actually translate to real life performance, right? So it's one thing to be like, I feel angry and I feel like I have more control and I'm more certain and I feel like I'm more motivated. It's one thing to say, but it's another thing to do. Does this actually translate to better performance? Will, in our situations, as we're treating a panic disorder, panic attack, and agoraphobia, will this actually translate to better performance of the client, of the patient? Will the patient actually do better, be more motivated, be able to overcome the things that scare them better? You betcha. Let's just take a look at it. Okay, but before we get there, quick note, they did a little confirmatory thing to make sure that their theory is sound. So the theory was that first you must experience a threat, followed by induction of anger at an enemy, and then that will increase certainty. So they found exactly that. I shouldn't even stop there because it's not exactly relevant to, not that relevant to us. But let me just read this quickly. Strong evidence, we found, study 2 found strong evidence for our theoretical account that it is the combinatorial experience of anger at a specific enemy following an experience of anxiety that drives perceptions of control, uncertainty, and motivation. Meaning, they're just saying that, hey, you know, we want to make sure that in situations, which is why this is so perfect for agoraphobia and panic disorder, in situations where there's something scary, if we then induce anger in combination with showing a target that you can get angry at, that specific combination of sequence of events is what seems to increase control and certainty and motivation, right? So that's it, which I'm so happy about because, again, this study just speaks directly to agoraphobia and panic disorder. And I don't think these authors realize how directly they're talking to our thing. Yeah, I should just email them and be like, dude, what you did is actually amazing. The consequences for the treatment of panic disorder and agoraphobia, academically speaking, are tremendous. All right, let's keep going. Here we are, the final punchline that these researchers throw. In the final study, they actually had them do like a little task. Like, I don't remember what it was, but imagine just anything like sorting toothpicks or hitting spacebar when you see a green light. I forget which one of those things, what it was exactly, but they had them do an actual task. And they found that when they first showed them threat, then induced anger, and also showed them somebody to be mad at, they found increased motivation, increased performance, which should be correlated with their self-reported levels of motivation, right? Okay, so that's that. Now let me show you how fitting this into, how to fit this, how do I fit this into treatment? So if you are you're driving your own treatment, you can try to make use of this. Now, I'm going to tell you something about self-treatment. If it's agoraphobia, it really helps to have somebody go out there with you, man. I'm telling you, when I compare the effectiveness of, we can compare it to 3 different versions of treatment for agoraphobia. Treatment 1 is you meet with a therapist within session. Okay, that's one level. That's least effective in my view. Second level of effectiveness, slightly more effective, is when you have your therapist connect by video chat or by phone while you're out there challenging yourself, doing exposure therapy. That's second most effective. But by far the most effective method is if the therapist is out there with you, right next to you. I think studies on that also will be really cool. I mean, there are studies on that, but they don't show the difference that I see in my practice. Like when I'm there with, and I don't know if it has something to do with the way I present. I don't know. There's something about it. There's something about it that when I'm there, it's just so much more effective, so much more powerful. But anyways, I forget why I got onto this. Let me just keep going. Let's talk about how to fit this for self-treatment. So here, I just wanted to find myself a blank page so I can draw some stuff. So let's first go over what a holistic treatment for panic attacks can look like. Okay, so one thing we're going to start with first is ACT skills. So that's going to be the first thing. Then we're going to go into probably, well, no, actually, then we're going to go into exposure planning. Not sure if it's even important to mention this. Exposure planning, right? So we're going to do a exposure hierarchy. If you remember my other videos, it's a little triangle. So meaning it's just we're going to figure out the order in which we're going to have you do scary stuff. So ACT first, exposure planning. Well, it could be ACT, paradoxical intent. So ACT, you know what? Scratch this. Scratch this. I'm not being clear about it. Let's scratch this out. So typically it's ACT PI education. So first you go through education. You first understand how this stuff works, right? That takes up to like 4 or 5 sessions. You got to practice your ACT skills a lot. ACT skill practice. So you can't just be like, oh, okay, I understand how it goes and go. Typically you need a good amount of practice. 15 minutes twice a day. So 15 minutes twice a day. 15 minutes. Wow, hold on. 2 times. What a mess. I'm in that kind of a mood today. Messy mood. 2 times per day. Okay. And it's only after about the 4th or 5th about-ish session, maybe 6th, that you'll be ready to start doing exposure. So somewhere around that time, so about the 4th, 5th session, we're going to start doing exposure planning. Okay. So that's where you'll figure out how to trigger your panic. If you have agoraphobia, it's probably going to be specific situations. If you have panic disorder, it's probably going to be something interoceptive. So like increasing your heart rate, hyperventilation, things like that. So once you start, so let's go over so once you have this, right, you're ready to go. Once you understand how ACT and PI works and you have your exposure plan, or exposure hierarchy, it's another word for that, you're good to go. You're ready to start making use of it. So how do we make use of it? First thing you do is you pursue. So first step is pursuit of exposure. So you move towards your exposure target, whatever that is, right? So if it's agoraphobia, it's you take a step outside of your house and you go towards whatever you find scary. If it's the mall, you start moving towards the mall. If you have panic disorder, you probably start doing something to elicit sensations that you associate with having a panic attack. So that's known as interoceptive exposure. So that's the first thing. As soon as you start experiencing, well, actually on your way towards that exposure, you're practicing your ACT skills. Okay. Once you start feeling some symptoms bubble up, you stay with ACT for a bit, and then you move into PI, paradoxical intent. Okay, so that's when you try to make it worse. And this is, by the way, more or less in the order of intensity. Finally, once you do your ACT skills and you feel willing to try and you're ready to do paradoxical intent, you do paradoxical intent and you max out on paradoxical intent. You're willing, you're once again willing to try to make it even more worse. You're willing to try to make it even worse. At that point, you go into interoceptive exposure, classical, because there are two different types of interoceptive exposures that we use. I'm only going to be talking about the classic type. There's this new A.J.B version of interoceptive exposure. It's a very light version. If you were to do it, you'd be doing it like way in the beginning, like even before you start pursuing your exposure hierarchy plan. You'd be doing your new age exposure. Not really relevant because it's honestly it's not that it's a waste of time, but like I would only do it if you're super fearful of your symptoms, like you get triggered like that. If that's the case, then yeah, we might start with a new age exposure. But to be honest, we also end up doing a little bit of the new age exposure during your ACT training, so it's kind of like a overkill. Anyways, so yeah, so first you start by pursuing your panic attacks, then you go into ACT. Then when you're ready, you go into paradoxical intent. This is all in that same moment, right? So you're pursuing it, your symptoms escalate, you start doing ACT mindfulness skills, then you start doing paradoxical intent. And then once you're ready, you go into interoceptive exposure. So interoceptive exposure is basically you are trying to make yourself have physiological sensations within your body that are similar or identical to when you have a panic attack. So, for example, you might hyperventilate on purpose. So it might look like something like this, right? You might just do that for like 30, 40 times, 50 times, however long, right? If you're noticing that your anxiety starts spiking, you just keep on going, right? So that's what this exposure looks like. Then so at this point, you might actually experience a panic attack, in which case, good job, keep going. If you've seen my other videos, overcoming your panic attacks is all about increasing your willingness to experience them, right? And these are just little ways of having you acclimate yourself to that state, right? And what's going to happen when you do this without running away, willingness, whatever, what a mess. What's going to happen is if you do this, right, and you don't run away, your willingness, eventually your panic symptoms will fade out completely, even, possibly. Maybe in the beginning, not so much, but as you get better and better with this, so after a couple of days of doing this consistently, they're just going to go away completely. In that case, you go again, once again, you pursue again. So this is kind of like a roadmap for agoraphobia, right? Because pursuit here represents you actually going towards a thing, a situation or a place that actually triggers your panic attacks. Whereas if you have panic disorder, your pursuit will just be interoceptive exposure. Most likely. People with panic disorder have agoraphobic tendencies. But if you have a clean-cut panic disorder, then you won't, going places will probably not trigger anything. But in most situations, in most cases, people have a mixture of two things. So you may be using pursuit of actual physical locations, or you may be just using interoceptive, or both. If you have agoraphobia, you're using both. If you have panic disorder, clean cut with no agoraphobic traits, then you're going to be using interoceptive as your pursuit. So same thing. If panic disorder, then your pursuit is interoceptive. So again, hyperventilation, maybe spinning in a circle, maybe breathing through a very tight straw. Then you're doing ACT, then you're doing PI, and you wash and repeat back to interoceptive exposure until your panic fades completely. Now, the question is, where do you fit anger into this? Well, man, I made a big mess of this drawing, but hopefully you can still see me. Yeah, I'm going to change the color. That's what I'm going to do. Okay, that way you'll be able to see where anger fits. Anger fits into pursuit. So, anger, here, I'm just going to put A. So when you're pursuing, if you can maintain anger, you'll get farther with fewer symptoms. Not here, not during ACT. Then again, it applies to paradoxical intent And then again, it applies to interoceptive exposure. So why does it work for pursuit, PI, and interoceptive exposure stages? Because while you're pursuing, let's say you have agoraphobia, while you're moving towards the thing that you fear, maintaining anger will be increasing your sense of motivation, control, confidence. Will be increasing your sense of confidence, which will undermine the panic cycle. So if you've seen my other videos, you understand what the panic cycle looks like. It looks something like this. Or if you want to combine everything together, it looks like a spiral, right? You'll just interrupt it. You're interrupted, right? So during paradoxical intent, again, anger helps because you're approaching. Remember, anger is an approach emotion. Pursuit is an approach behavior. Interoceptive exposure, it's an approach behavior. What are you approaching? You're approaching your panic. So anger plays a crucial role here. It can play a crucial role. The reason why you don't use it in ACT though is because ACT is a mindfulness state. It's a state without, your only goal is to have no goals, basically. It's a observing state. I'm neither pushing towards something nor am I pulling away from it. I'm just observing, I'm being here, and I'm watching everything unfold. It's like a middle ground, okay? So that's why we don't use anger. We don't try to connect with anger. Okay, so now let's talk about how do you wake up anger? How do I, because I find that if I just ask my clients to get mad at their panic, that doesn't work because it's too terrifying. So how do we wake it up? Well, first, I recommend personify your panic. You may not have to, but it can be helpful. Personify panic. So what's personifying it? Make it into a little monster or goblin or something, right? Imagine something. What would it look like? I don't know. Here's my representation of of a personified panic, you know? What's the backstory to this monster? Well, the backstory has to be explaining the mechanism, the loop, the way it exists within you. So this little monster, goblin, or whatever image you want to give it, feeds on your fear. It whispers little BS. It bluffs you into responding with fear. As soon as you give it fear, it feeds itself and it grows and it lives. But you can kill it. You can kill it by interrupting the fear, by not feeding it. You can starve it out. How do we starve it out? Well, by not being afraid of it, by calling its bluff, right? So one way you can starve it to death is by saying to it, okay, I'm willing for what you're telling me is going to happen. As soon as you say that, it's like in poker. Oh, I got nothing left. It's powerless suddenly, right? So first step, personify panic. It will help you express anger more naturally. 2, again, I would at this stage ask you to ask yourself, okay, can I get mad at it now? Probably you're going to say no. So what do? Recall anger. Recall a memory. Recall angry memory. Try to recall a time where you felt pure cut anger, rage even, right? When I say pure cut, I mean like, so sometimes people will when I ask them to do this, they will tell me, ah, shit, I just realized something. Okay. All right, whatever. Sometimes when I ask people to recall anger, they will tell me that, hold on, I just lost my train of thought because I realized something irrelevant to this video. Just remember to do something. Jesus Christ, hold on one second, let me collect my thoughts. Oh, okay, I remember now. So sometimes people will tell me that, I'll ask them, okay, so tell me the last time you felt angry, and they'll tell me, that I'll ask them, how did you feel in your body during that time? And they'll tell me they felt anxious, right? That's more of an example of you felt angry and then you shut down that anger, right? So I don't want any signal anxiety. I want a situation where you feel comfortable expressing your anger, right? So I don't know what that is for you. Try to remember that. And then remember, this is an important part. Recall angry memory. Step 3, focus on physiology. How did you feel in your body? What did your body feel like in that moment? Okay? So, well, why do I say that? Because studies show that is one of the most effective ways of inducing anger. Focusing on the feeling. And step 4, focus back on panic. Focus on your personified panic. Focus on personified panic and how and what you will do now to kick its ass. Okay, so focus on it. Focus on the task at hand. Boom. You should now be motivated. You should now be feeling more zest, to more willingness to do what you got to do. Okay, that's it. Now, will you be able to apply this? Like first thing, if this is you're just starting out treatment, will you be able to just use this only? No, probably not. Like I mentioned, it's going to be part of treatment. So part of treatment is as exposure, ACT, PI, interoceptive. Right? So this is what your treatment, more holistic treatment looks like. You got to be good at mindful observation. You got to learn how not to run away, because people will run away. And depending on how much, if you've meditated a lot in your life, you'll probably be better at this. If you haven't meditated much, then you'll probably be not so good at this. So, you got to be practicing 15 minutes per day, twice a day, 15 minutes, 2 times per day. Okay. And then use it in combination with everything else. So you use it here, you don't use it during ACT, you use it at paradoxical intent, and you use it during interoceptive exposure. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video.